Sorry, gotta push all these buttons here for some reason. Okay, now I got everything go on here. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Barb Clark. If I haven't met you yet, just wanted to introduce myself. I am the Training and Exercise Manager for the Intermountain Center for Disaster Preparedness. For those of you that are new to our organization, the ICDP is a training and education center, and we not only provide educational opportunities like we're doing here today, but we also create drills and exercises for organizations and do research into the latest in disaster preparedness, as well as help organizations with their disaster plans. For those of you who have joined us on other symposium presentations this year, you know that we had really hoped to be back to an in-person format, but unfortunately the pandemic had other plans. It's really hard to believe that it's been 20 plus months since our world really did change dramatically. And we are going to keep our fingers crossed that by next year we can return to an in-person gathering and perhaps offer this symposium format in a hybrid platform, so we can do in-person as well as connect to people across the internet. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping here. If you registered before this morning, you should have received an email from me with a link to the SurveyMonkey that you can do an evaluation of this presentation at the end of it. If you did not get that link, please let me know in the chat and I will make sure that I can send it to you. If your computer is not already on mute, please go ahead and mute it. If you don't mind, turn off your video feed, although just a few of you are okay, but if we have everybody on, with their video feeds on, it just makes it difficult in case of bandwidth problems. If you do not have your name on your video feed, please make sure that you have your first and last name on there, and that's especially important if you want credit for this course. Also, those of you who are calling in, if you do want credit for the class, please make sure at some point you email me or text me. You should have all my contact information and let me know who you are at that phone number. So again, we can make sure that you get credit on train. If you would like a certificate of attendance, again, please email me and I will make sure that I get that sent to you. If you have questions during the presentation, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If it's something that can wait till the end, we will do a Q&A at the end of the presentation. If it's something that's very critical, I will go ahead and interrupt the speaker and ask the question. But at the end, we'll have time to have you perhaps unmute and unmute your video so you can ask Dr. Cole in person, basically, in video person. All right, so let me introduce you to today's speaker. Dr. Leslie Cole currently serves the U.S. Department of Agriculture Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services as a veterinarian medical officer and foreign animal disease diagnostician and the emergency coordinator for Arkansas and Oklahoma. In that position, she works with stakeholders from other governmental agencies, private practitioners, industry, and non-governmental organizations to improve our readiness to respond to incidents and disasters that impact animals and our food supply. Dr. Cole received her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Oklahoma State University in 1986 and is board certified by the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine. She is also a member of the Oklahoma Veterinary Medical Association, the American Veterinary Medical Association, and the U.S. Animal Health Association. Dr. Cole's practice includes state and federal regulatory medicine and a mixed small animal private practice. Leslie served as an instructor for the USDA's International Services, where she provided training on animal disease management and investigation for the Malaysian Department of Veterinary Services in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 2016. She serves as the co-leader for the volunteer unit of the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps' State Animal Response Team. And she serves as the planning section chief for one of the nation's National Incident Management Veterinary Service teams. As a planning section chief for the incident management team, Leslie has served as the planning section chief for the 2010 highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak, the 2016 Missourian avian flu outbreak. She did 2 deployments in 2017 to the Texas fever tick outbreak response at the Texas-Mexico border. And in December of 2018, she was deployed for 3 weeks and served as the branch planning chief for the Butte County, California Camp Fire's animal sheltering branch. In April of 2019, she was deployed for 3 weeks to California for the virulent Newcastle disease emergency response. And then just recently in 2021, during the COVID outbreak, Leslie worked on the FEMA mission assignment for the USDA and helped to manage Oklahoma's emergency management requests for veterinarians to serve as force multipliers and assist Oklahoma State Department of Public Health as vaccinators or with vaccinators. Leslie is married to Dr. George Jackson and they have 2 great sons. So please join me as we welcome Dr. Leslie Cole.
Thank you, Barb. First of all, a technical check. Can you hear me okay? And am I screen sharing with everyone okay?
It all looks good from my end. Seeing a lot of
Okay.
odds. So.
All right. Thank you. Sorry for the kind of too long introduction. I apologize. I didn't think every single thread would be read. It is truly a pleasure for me to get to talk to you today and to share some of the experiences and some information about what goes on, in animal response and some responses that have gone on that have really made a difference in the security of the food supply of the United States of America and our balance of trade. A lot of the things we do as you know, in public health and in USDA in veterinary services is pretty unheralded. So we're going to talk about some of those things. And also, I'm going to talk about a couple of other global pandemics that you probably haven't heard of besides COVID. So here we go. And again, thanks. And, if you have pressing questions, I think Barb said you can interrupt or you can put them in the chat and we'll have 15 minutes or so at the end to address your questions. All right. And for clarity and honesty, I participated in the Moore tornado response. I didn't make it to the Joplin tornado, but they were both big old bad storms. Okay. All right. Whoops. Barb talked about my background. I come from Payne County, Oklahoma, a small county in central Oklahoma, where Oklahoma State University is located. And I have a pretty rural background. I started working for a veterinarian when I was 13, and that's all I've done my whole life. And it's been a while. So I think I kind of apprenticed and I really have been fortunate in my career choices and in my career path. Probably many of you have thought about this, but nobody said emergency response about anything as a way I could use my degree in veterinary medicine when I was in veterinary school. And again, I have found this path and it has been very personally and professionally important and gratifying, and to get to work with response partners like you all around the country has been the highlight of my professional career. So I want you guys to know that, and I appreciate all that you do out there. Let's see, the first, and I'm going to just slip into this, and it's going to be chronological, just as my experiences. The first response I was involved in was as an officer in the Oklahoma Veterinary Medical Association when the Alfred P. Murrah building bombing occurred, April 19th, 1995. I can tell you that is a very personal event for me. And the way I became involved at this point, before I was in regulatory medicine or anything, was as an officer of the OVMA, we started receiving requests for assistance from responders down at the bombing site. As you can see, this kind of famous response dog picture and their owner, these dogs were down in the rubble pile of the building with torches going on, searching in voids and everything, and they didn't have boots for their feet. And so a call went out to the OVMA and local veterinarians for vet wrap. I don't know if you guys know that, elasticon. And so these dogs could get their feet wrapped to do search in the rubble pile and in the basement. So there's a picture of the building. And I can tell you, I was 10 miles away from this when this thing was blown up. And the concussion almost knocked me down. The concussion away from this. So think about that. I was 10 miles away. All right. I currently work for USDA, and there were employees of USDA, my veterinary services fellows, in the Murrow building, and 7 of 10 of those employees were killed that day. And this picture is another kind of famous image, but this was the area veterinarian in charge for USDA, Dr. Brian Espy, that day, and he was knocked down under his desk and wasn't killed. And was then rescued. But you know, you can see all the people that were lost, and it was a very impactful event, and we got pulled in as veterinarians and as members of the community. You can see here's them working the rubble pile, and actually, and trying to get to any signs of life, as you guys probably know way better than I do. This is a picture of probably 2/3 of the search and rescue and recovery dogs that were involved in the response. We got together, the veterinarians in Oklahoma, and awarded these guys with the certificates of appreciation and made them our working dog of the year group the year after the building exploded. And so these are the dogs that we had to use all the vet wrap there to bandage their paws. So I think you guys can respond to those dogs and their handlers on a personal way. And I just wanted you to know that was kind of my start on this journey. Okay. I was working for the state of Oklahoma at this point, and we had a big wildfire season in the spring, which is our wildfire season here in the cross timbers and tall and midgrass prairie. And you can see the plot of the fires. And so that was another thing. That's the first time I worked in an incident management team, and I was put in to help with plans. And that's my first taste of the incident management system. And I'm going to editorialize here a little bit. The incident command system is a wonderful suite of tools to help people like us bring order to chaos. I would imagine you guys have drank the ICS Kool-Aid as I have, but I just want to say that ICS works. Okay, and it has worked for us in all these various incidents I'm going to go through. In 2007, we had a big blizzard in the Oklahoma Panhandle, southeast Colorado, northeast New Mexico, the northern Texas Panhandle, southwest Kansas. And the water froze and people couldn't hay their cows or get the pumps on the wells to work. So we did some emergency response and support work for our producers that had needs out in the Panhandle. And this is if you can see my cursor, that's an Oklahoma Air National Guard Chinook, and you can put three or five big round bales in a Chinook and then dump them out for these cows. And they came running to that feed once the Chinook was gone. Okay, but the drifts from this wind-driven blizzard were 20 feet plus high in the whole area. So that's why assistance was needed. Okay. And I got to ride in the Chinook and GPS locate where we dropped the hay, and just happened to see, I heard a pronghorn antelope out there as we were flying over them, and we did some terrain following out in the lava flows of northwest Oklahoma, finding places to drop hay. So that was quite an event for us. And here's the crew that was involved in all parts of the event, from, fueling, maintaining, flying, getting the hay, organizing the hay, planning, logistics, and everything. So, ultimately, these are local events. Local people respond to their community's needs. And so just wanted you to see that. Is there a question?
Right.
Someone's not muted. Okay,
Trying to find
next event was Hurricane Gustav. This was after Katrina, I think, and maybe not. Anyway, evacuees from New Orleans were housed in a warehouse in Oklahoma City as a shelter. And as part of that, a co-located companion animal shelter was set up, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture managed that shelter. And so here is just a view, respecting privacy of the shelter location and some of the facilities. I think over in here we had pharmacies set up, places where people could get diapers or childcare supplies and things. And then the co-located pet shelter was just outside the building. And we had fish, we had snakes, we had rabbits, we had gerbils, we had little dogs, we had cats. And it was quite amazing to see what the folks had brought with them on the bus from New Orleans. Just as an aside, this lady came up to us, while we were setting up the shelter and intaking, and she was just this lady standing there in a coat, and may we help you? And she opened up 3 layers of her coat, and down under there was this great big python curled around her, keeping warm, I suppose. But it was but just, you never know what you're going to see, right? This was something that having their pet with them was very important to the people who had to evacuate and leave their homes, their state. Coming out and helping us care for their pets, where they would come out and walk them or care for them however was appropriate, gave them a little piece of normalcy and provided them with some source of doing things that they usually did, and that they had some control over something in their life. So it was very much appreciated and very much served a real need of those folks that were evacuated. Okay. And along with just housing, food, a little biosecurity, keeping sick dogs or cats or whatever away from the rest of the population of our house animals was a thing. We provided veterinary care. If there was no vaccination history, if people couldn't say that, or if they didn't have any kind of deworming history, we provided those things for these animals, when it was available. Like, we didn't vaccinate the snakes, but we did the little dogs and cats and things. So again, this provided a much needed little snip of normalcy and comfort and something that they had some impact on and power over for these folks that were so far from their homes and really in a lot of need and distress. So that was a very interesting experience, in sheltering refugees or evacuees and co-located sheltering of pets. Here we had our mobile Incident Command Post, which is also a mobile laboratory that the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry has. And it was used as the Incident Command Post parked by that warehouse during the Gustav evacuee support response. Okay. Okay, now we're going on to a major natural disaster that some of you may have heard of, the 2013 Central Oklahoma tornado outbreak. It mainly impacted the city of Moore. It impacted several other small communities, but it's more notable as the Moore tornado of 2013, at least for us. And you had a complex incident when you make the cover of Time. That's another aside I'll say to you folks on the wildland fire side or incident response side is these incidents very frequently that I'm going to talk about do tip the scale into being very complex incidents. This event, the Moore tornado, was a very short notice event. There was a gubernatorial disaster declaration. There was a presidential disaster declaration. There were dead preschoolers. There were dead first graders. Multiple county jurisdictions were affected. Multiple municipal jurisdictions were affected. And a lot of different resources were brought to bear, and so the incident was very politically sensitive and very complex. We got a presidential visit out of this, I think. So you all know when that happens, that just tips up the complexity as well. This is a photo of the tornado path, and we build most of our houses and smaller buildings here in central Oklahoma on a concrete slab. And I don't know if you can appreciate this, but the path of the tornado is about a half a mile wide, and it scoured all the structures down to the concrete slabs, as you can see as it goes on. There was an elementary school, the Moore Municipal Hospital, Interstate 35 was in the path, and there was a 200 horse stable down here that was a training stable with a lot of expensive horses in it. So again, a lot of complexity, a lot of things to consider, a lot of pieces to the puzzle, a lot of moving pieces to respond to this, to help the community do life saving and recover. Okay. Here again, I'm just going to go through this because this can help you appreciate again the complexity that I'm talking about in this. Like I said, the 2 disaster declarations, there were 24 fatalities. The little children that were killed in their school, taking shelter in a corridor and it collapsed on them. The counties impacted were Cleveland, Lincoln, Oklahoma, and Pottawatomie counties. One of the largest population center of the state is that metroplex area there. 4,000 homes, businesses impacted, many destroyed, major damage, minor damage, $2 billion estimate price tag on damages. We lost 120 horses, mostly at that training facility, but some others. Numerous strayed livestock everywhere. Companion animals were everywhere. People found little dogs that had run 15 miles, in their panic from the storm. So we had, again, a formal incident command post for the animal planning branch, the animal response branch, and that was managed by the a unified command between the United States Department of Agriculture and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, the state veterinarian. And, we implemented the planning P. We had IPs, safety officers. This is the morning operational period briefing before everyone sets out to do whatever their tasks may be, whether it's identification of fallen livestock, locating them, or search and rescue for strayed livestock or pets. If it were people who need sheltering with animals, we established 3 animal shelters to manage the pets and other companion animals and even horses and things that were scattered and strayed by the storm. Okay, we had a triage set up at the contractor bay at the Home Depot there in Moore. Lots of animals came through that. A lot of documentation's done on the spot, triage for medical needs, and referral to the OSU College of Veterinary Medicine Teaching Hospital for serious injuries or broken bones or orthopedic type work or terrible significant soft tissue trauma. So and then intake of strays and stuff with looking for any type of microchip or other identifying mark or tag or anything like that, and then photos to help with this. As I said, there were animals strayed for dozens of miles in a broad circle around where the storm hit. And so photographing the animals that we took into our shelters that were not known owned was a huge part in working to get these strayed animals reunified with their owners. And this was online at a SharePoint, no, a Facebook site or something that the State Department of Ag managed. And then we had duplicates of these pictures at each one of the animal shelters, the 3 animal shelters, where we intake and people come and look for their pets so they can look at the pictures. And even if it's not at that shelter, they can see maybe that their pet isn't at one of the other 2 shelters. So this was a critical function to support the community in its recovery and these desperate people looking for their companion animals. This is just an org chart that I wanted you to see, typical ICS org chart for the tornado and our response to it. We organized kind of functionally by the small animal group and the large animal group. And, I've talked quite a bit about the small animal triage and reunification and things. One thing about the large animal side, particularly the horses at that training stable, many of them were very expensive horses and were insured and had, kind of complicated ownership and things. So identifying those horses, their carcasses, as completely as possible was very important to a lot of the owners. And so a lot of work went into that. And these horses were in the direct path of the storm. Fences and pipes were sized in that tremendous wind of the tornado. And, we have tough folks that are our livestock inspectors and our veterinarians, but the type of injuries and damage to these horses, to their carcasses, was so profound that it was very emotionally traumatizing to our folks because, they own horses themselves, they're cattlemen, they're livestock raisers, and part of that is a true care for the animals that we are charged with. And so this was a big deal. And this is when psychological first aid first really reared its head as a need in a response to us in the incident management team. So we had psychological first aid folks out helping and being available almost from the outset. Okay, so never forget that. Okay, and this was near that horse farm. And how do you plan for that? How do you help your community recover from this kind of a thing? And then this, how do we help these folks? And again, I believe our business, whatever is the details, is helping our communities. And these were big events. Okay, moving on. to the Texas cattle fever tick incursion response of 2017. I'll go on and show you some background information to help you understand this, but if you can see my cursor, these are cattle fever tick, Buophilus ticks. And the reason this is important is because these ticks carry a disease organism that is foreign to the United States, and our cattle populations are naive to this disease and it kills them. Okay. And also having this parasite and the disease that they carry in the United States can affect our international trade status for agricultural products. One of the main animals that can carry this tick around down in along the Rio Grande River in South Texas is a nilgai. And this is an Indian subcontinent antelope. The males can weigh 700 or 800 pounds. And the folks down there that work with these things, they have been released or gotten away from Texas game ranches, and starting with the King Ranch down in like the 1910s or 1920s. So there's a fairly significant feral population of these big antelopes down in South Texas and in North Mexico. And these carry the ticks, and they tell me that they may not jump over a fence, but they can crawl under almost any fence unless it's concreted into the ground. So, there you go. That is a nilgai. And I just thought this was pretty good. You might be a redneck if you list tisk removal on your resume. There you go. We had IMTs, incident management teams from Veterinary Services down in South Texas, Cameron County, Brownsville, and Webb counties. I think that's Laredo. We ran a unified command with Texas Animal Health down in there. And the ticks, we have pushed the ticks back through control programs across the the Rio Grande River down into Mexico. And we just have this permanent quarantine zone along the Red River there. Here we go. The counties in yellow are kind of where incursions were, and the red is kind of the systematic or permanent quarantine zone. And so these guys, which are USDA employees called the tick riders, they wear bulletproof vests, they ride their horses, they have sat phones in their saddlebags, and they intercept illegal cattle movements across the Rio Grande River, which happen a lot. And they intercept strays of cattle and try to haze back across the river or capture strays that come across from Mexico that can probably have these ticks on it. Okay, so let's go back here. Part of the response was that these ticks started being found on cattle going through sales in southern Texas. So that meant that cattle outside the quarantine zone were infected with these ticks that had been carried in by the nilgai and the white-tailed deer. And so we set up this response to push those ticks back down into across the Rio Grande and back into the permanent quarantine area, that kind of yellow and red zone on that map I showed you. So the way you do that is you treat the host, the nilgai, the cattle, the white-tailed deer, with ivermectin, the dewormer and insecticide in molasses tubs. And the molasses tubs, is a bait to get them to ingest this drug, which kills the ticks. Okay. And also part of the response was enhanced dipping and examination of animals leaving this quarantine zone so that they didn't carry ticks with them into the rest of the state and get marketed all over the country. Okay, so enhanced dipping, we have big dipping vats down along the border and a little ways inland. And here are some Brahma heifers that are wanting to be sold outside of the quarantine area that their owner has brought to one of our dipping stations. And they dive down into this big vat of an insecticide kind of dip solution, like you would dip your dog for fleas or ticks. We dip the cows. And It's probably about 10 or 12 feet deep. So when these cows jump off in there to go across, they totally submerge. And so that gets them totally saturated with this dipping solution and kills the ticks that are on them. Another thing is they're animals that leave the area also are what we call scratched for ticks. To people examine them that had experience in doing this and look where the ticks are usually attached to animals, cattle, horses, burros, whatever's leaving. And if you find ticks on them, they can either be treated individually or they can be dipped. So a lot of effort went in to push this incursion of these very significant parasites and the disease they carry that is not in the United States back south across the border. Okay. And, working down in there, we had a lot of people from all over the country deploy and rotate through on this response. And it was a really significant event if you strayed into Mexico personally, or, and so we had to do a lot of in-briefing with our responders to make sure that they knew where they were, that they didn't accidentally drive across the road that went to Mexico, and to understand how the border security measures at that time worked. And so again, a lot of moving pieces in this response to protect the food supply in American agriculture. Okay. And here we go again, back to this. And believe it or not, that guy right there, his name is Tony Romo. And he was a really nice man, and he was a really good cowboy, and he was a tick rider down in there. And so I got to go out with them on a gather, and they live the cowboy life and the cowboy way down in those flat, short grass pastures, and the brush, the mesquite brush down in there, and haze and capture strayed cattle, potentially infected cattle. And it was a really interesting experience. And again, you get to see a lot of different things that are in place that most people don't know about. They go on every day to protect the food supply of the United States and the health and public health of the United States. Okay. Another thing about fever ticks is, as I said, a lot of effort and taxpayer dollars in the United States has gone to pushing it back down into Texas. Historically, in the late, 1890s, or, you think of the cattle drives and stuff from Texas up to Kansas City after the Civil War. The blue is the range of those ticks, and they carry that disease organism that killed our cattle. And just this is another reason that it's really important to keep those ticks south of the border and in that permanent quarantine zone right down here, because it affected the ability of livestock producers in all of these states and all of these counties and all of these areas before they were pushed back through, again, taxpayer dollars and effort, careers of many people. Okay, here is another event, the 2014-15 highly pathogenic avian influenza North American outbreak. We all know ad nauseum that we're in a global pandemic. This was a global pandemic that affected poultry and birds in this time period. This was a global, it's called epizootic for animals, but it's a global pandemic that we dealt with here in North America in 2014 and 15. If you can tell, this is a poultry barn, turkeys in Minnesota that got infected from wild birds, and look at the mortality rate in there. I don't care what species you're looking at. If you see a virus or an organism that causes 100% mortality like that, no matter what the species, that is a very sobering sight. And another thing we care about highly pathogenic avian influenza is that it is possible for these viruses to swap genes with the influenza viruses of people. And this is where the next pandemic flu can arise, is an outbreak of this type of disease. Okay, so that's one of the main reasons we respond aggressively to outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza in our commercial poultry here in the United States. We're in backyard poultry. And it also, because of the potential zoonotic nature of these viruses, has huge impact on our ability to trade poultry products, eggs, chicken, turkey, feathers, feather meal, internationally, and that's billions and billions of dollars of black ink on our national balance of trade. Plus, this outbreak caused the death of so many egg layers in the north central United States that the price of cake mix went up. The price of eggs went up for consumers all over the United States. This affected the security of the food supply. And I would venture a guess that many of you didn't even know it happened. Okay, so, and you can see all the states that had outbreaks in them. And I responded to California, Washington State, Minnesota, Missouri, Iowa, and Arkansas as a member of the team, one of the incident management teams that responded to this. And I was gone from my home more than 100 days during this response. So that's pretty long for me. Okay, here are the steps with confirmed cases. And you can see, oops, sorry. If you know anything about flyways, migratory bird flyways, waterfowl flyways, you can see this outbreak followed the Pacific flyway, and this outbreak followed the Central flyway. So think about that. This was an Asian virus, and many of the waterfowl that migrate on these flyways winter in the Arctic, and they commingle with birds that have flown up from Asia, and they swap viruses, and they brought Asian highly pathogenic avian influenza virus with them as they migrated south in front of a big storm. And there was a big storm in the North Pacific that kind of drove this, because, or it was a part of the ecology of this outbreak, because it was really a serious early storm, and it stressed a lot of these migratory waterfowl, and it drove them south kind of quickly. And so they were, as I said, stressed, so they were shedding more virus, putting more viruses into the environment, and that led to a species swap, and it got into our commercial poultry. The first cases were found in falcons that were used in organic wineries up in Washington to scare the birds away that would eat the grapes. And they shot the guys that had the falcons, harvested green-winged teal, just by shooting them and hunting them to feed to their falcons. And the green-winged teal had this virus, and then when it was fed to the falcons, it killed them. And so that was kind of our first clue that something was going on that was different. And as again, you can see, let's see, down here, sorry, there were 211 commercial flocks affected nationally, 21 backyard flocks. And I can't see those because of a bar here, but those are some numbers on the number of birds that died or were depopulated to get rid of this virus and its outbreak. We depopulate affected flocks so that we stop them making virus and shedding more virus into the environment. And we use firefighting foam with foam generators to euthanize these flocks. And so this is just some pictures of this foam depopulation being implemented with personal protective equipment. this is my friend Joe, and Joe was doing this, and he fell down in the foam and almost didn't get found, and his whole body was covered with this rash in response to the chemicals in the foam. So, this is dangerous business in a lot of ways. And this was a container that was used to move the carcasses to different disposal locations. And just a little information about what goes on for you guys. You know how it is on a big incident. This is the daily meeting schedule for the incident management team, full and busy. This was our incident command post and supply depot in Wilmington, Minnesota. The county emergency management folks let us use their facility, and it was too muddy to load this truck, drive it closer. So we were unloading personal protective equipment, Tyvek and Tychem, and shuttling it into the supply depot. Basic personal protective equipment was used to protect the responders and to make sure we didn't spread the virus. And these are things you had to do if you came back to the incident command post after you had been in an affected prim. And here's one of our supply rooms in there. Okay, here's some numbers. About $1 billion in congressional CCC funds were expended in this response. About 50 million head of poultry, that's layers, replacements, turkeys, died from the disease or were depopulated. Wholesale egg prices went up. That's wholesale price, and more than doubling the previous year's cost for large eggs. The United States lost 18 international trading partners for years because of this outbreak, and that was another $1 billion in trade. Okay, and 14% of the year's total trade revenue of the United States. Okay, so all very interesting facts. And there were 3,400 personnel from local, county, state, USDA, and contractor personnel. 250 APHIS personnel, state responders, contractors, and again, a big cost and a big economic impact. And here's just a little more information on what percent of the U.S. inventory was lost due to this disease outbreak in 2014 and 2015. Okay. And, again, that was a global pandemic because there were cases in Canada and Asia. So, we just got to see that. And incidentally, the climate conditions that were similar to that are kind of manifesting themselves in the North Pacific this year. And I guess it's a La Nina event, maybe has something to do with it. And also we're seeing outbreaks in Europe right now. So kind of we tightening our helmet, thinking about those conditions being duplicated again. Okay, in 2017, we had a very aggressive wildfire season again in Oklahoma. And this is kind of a dramatic picture of cattle fleeing the fire. And this is problematic, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But the only thing you can do is cut this fence and let them run and try to get them to move diagonally to the fire rather than right in front of it. So very challenging response environment there. Okay, here's some just impact pictures. There's no grazing left here, and so we had to provide hay to everybody that lost all their hay supplies. And you can see this cow, she is all singed. Chances are her teats have been burned off, so she can't feed her baby calf even if you could find it. There are a lot of cattle killed, And over the next year and a half, there was a huge spike in mortality of the cattle herds out in this part of the state because of the trauma or the smoke or the whatever insults they received during these fires. Here's a poor little old rabbit that's all singed up, and here's a burial pit with some of the burned up cattle carcasses, and you can see the baby calves there in the middle. And another thing, these cows, you know, that can't nurse their calves, if their calves did survive, something that was a community effort in the whole fire area was the FFA and 4-H kids took these calves and bottle fed them to help them survive. So again, you know, this is a whole community impact and a whole community response to get these things recovered from. Okay, let's see. Oh shoot, I've got something out of order here, but we'll come to it. And I'll show you that in a minute. I apologize. Another outbreak that happened that probably a lot of people don't know about was a New World screwworm outbreak in the Florida Keys in 2016 and 17. This is a screwworm, and they are a fly maggot that the female flies lay her eggs by any wound or mucous membrane or umbilical cord or vulva or eye of a large mammal or a mammal, and these larvae hatch, and then they eat the living flesh of the host. You know, most maggots we think of eat dead carcass material or putrescent debris. These New World screwworm larvae eat the living flesh of the animal, and they kill the animal that is their host. They eat through essential organs or nerves or blood vessels. They eat brains. They'll eat the newborn navel of newborns, and they just make such terrible wounds that the animal dies of toxicity, bacterial toxicity. I have people tell me who worked for USDA down in Texas and in Oklahoma that before New World screwworm was eliminated from the United States, again, great effort, most of the baby deer, the deer fawns, were killed every year because of the flies attacking their navels. And so we have more deer now that we have eliminated New World screwworm from the United States than we did before, just as something interesting for you guys to note. And people can be parasitized by screwworms too. So that's something to remember. They are a trade and health risk to mammals, which we're in there. A reintroduction could cost more than $1 billion to the livestock industry of the United States. In a 76 outbreak in Texas, 1.5 million cows and almost 500,000 goats were infested. And today, that's billions of dollars of lost production. And this is a terrible parasite. It causes tremendous, horrible suffering to the parasitized animal. And also it kills them. And so there's billions of dollars of economic impact, plus the animal welfare part of it. It's just a nasty parasite and disease. The 2016-17 Florida Key outbreak cost us $3.2 million, so we got off relatively cheap. Here are some pictures of, this is a dog that has probably a bite wound on his neck that got infected by screwworm. And these are New World screwworms lined up vertically in this wound, eating this dog's flesh, okay? And when these things fall out and hatch, this is a New World screwworm fly, and she's ready to go lay eggs on another animal with wounds or anything. So it is a vicious parasite and very tremendous impact. And it probably came into the Florida Keys on a boat, an illegal boat landing on either a dog or even a person from some island in the Caribbean that are not our friend, that we haven't helped eliminate screwworms from. And there's one right off the Florida Keys that probably comes to mind to everybody, and that's very much a possibility as a source of this imported infestation. And so we just have to constantly keep up our guard. Okay, here's a map, kind of a cool map of our activities in the Florida Keys. Sterile insect release site, that's what it is. And where we found wildflies and then no flies. And we have used a very ingenious, scientifically developed technique that was developed by USDA Agricultural Research Services scientists that's called sterile insect technique. And what they do is the female screwworm flies only mate one time, and what we do is produce sterile males at a plant down in Panama, and they're irradiated with gamma irradiation, and it sterilizes them. And if that female fly mates that one time in her life with that sterile fly, her eggs are sterile and don't hatch. If we provide an overabundance, millions and millions and millions of these sterile male flies to breed with the female flies in this outbreak, that's how we control the outbreak. That's how New World screwworm has been pushed out of the United States. The main animal impacted by the screwworm outbreak in the Florida Keys was the little key deer. They're very endearing. The people that live in the Keys care deeply about them. And it was during a rut, and so these little bucks were fighting each other and making wounds, and this transplanted group of flies got in those wounds and started killing the key deer. Here's one of the little males, bucks, with a screwworm infestation in a fight wound that killed him. And I'm going to not show you all my good pictures because it's lunchtime, but they're horrible. And here's a cat, kind of a feral cat that got screwworms in his infected ear, and it killed him. Okay. And it killed 142 of the little endangered key deer. And this is something, it got into domestic dog, cats, and pigs. And it was not reported for a couple of months. And so that let it get a lot worse. And then, you know, these were down in the Keys, separated from the continental United States. And then they found one dog in Homestead, Florida, which is on the very tip end of Florida, down as far south on the mainland about as you can get, not counting the Keys. And so we did the same sterile fly releases in that area, and surveillance didn't find any more flies, screwworm flies. Here is, you know, I told you about screwworm eradication. Here is where screwworms used to be through the 60s and 50s, and we used the sterile fly technique to drive these flies south, and they don't overwinter past there. The freeze kills them. But you can see there's a lot of United States that was in the screwworm range, and gradually using the sterile fly technique and a lot of American taxpayer dollars and the careers of people like me, we have pushed this parasite down south through Central America. And the line that we're holding against this fly right now, this parasite, is in the Darien Gap of Panama. You may have heard it lately talking about the Haitian immigrants or migrants that are coming up from the places they went on their diasporas after the big earthquake a few years ago in Haiti, and they're marching up through the Darien Gap. So that's at that isthmus of Panama down in there, right close to South America, and that's our battle line with this parasite. And we keep releasing sterile flies in that area to keep the screwworms from coming back up north through Central America and into the United States. So it's dynamic, it's not done, and it's an ongoing control effort to keep us free. Okay, and here are some of the folks that are doing, these are the sterile fly pupa, and they put them in these kind of cages out in the area where the female flies may be, and they hatch and release and go forth and breed with the female flies. This is the kind of logo of the sterile flies that are of the organization that produces those flies at their facility down in Panama. So very complex, and probably another thing a lot of you folks didn't know about that's ongoing. And just some fun pictures from Hurricane Harvey. I was with the Texas Animal Health Commission as a technical expert, assisting them in their incident command posts and in the animal response. And so if you can see, these are African Red River hogs who were kind of flooded out of their pens at their owner's house, and they got in the owner's house and they're up on the couch getting out of the water. So here's other, this is a big shelter down in Houston. Here's support, Chinook support, moving supplies and personnel. These are Texas A&M veterinary students and National Guard folks down there doing triage and search and rescue and helping. Just more pictures. Supplies and managing people, using an incident command system to do all this, and impact pictures. You can see the high point is the road a lot of places down in there, and you can see the public safety aspect that might bring about. And up on the levees, so a lot of these animals are pushed out of their pastures and into higher ground, which may be places that it's not the best that they be. That's about all they can do. Using airboats to find these stranded cattle and feed them. There's hay in the Chinook again. And again, just out surveying damage. And this was a dog that came to one of the shelters, and he was obviously owned, but he'd come and they'd give him food and he'd take it off somewhere. He did that a bunch of times down in there. That was quite interesting. And, there's a lot of flood water, a lot of inundation from that incredible training, dumping rainfall that came out of Harvey. And you can say, well, these horses, their heads up, they're doing okay. But, that's not the case. This is what happens to a horse's skin in that nasty flood water for a few days. This is an after picture of this same horse that the Texas A&M folks gave me. And here is another horse. You can see where he's been in the water up to about here and how his skin's sloughing off. So this is a huge impact that's kind of inapparent, and, that people care about, and that, again, helping folks manage recovery. These are all parts of that, and these are things that happen. And this, requires significant veterinary expertise and care and nursing care to get these horses through this. There were 3 big shelters set up, I think, with Harvey, and here's a few of them. And you can see there's number of pets sheltered, different things like that. And these are, how incident response is an information gobbling thing. Somebody always needs a sit rep. They need good data. You need people that have a feel for the data to know that, when something's reported that's just not right, that number is not right. You got to have people familiar with the data. So there's just so many details in providing actionable situational awareness, actionable data, supply justification, response, force justification. So another component of these animal responses is gathering, managing, and getting all that data to support the response, whether it's logistics or burn rate or justifications to higher ups, is a huge part of what we do on the incident management teams. Barb mentioned that I got to go to the Butte County fire, and we were in Chino, incident command post was in Chino, and Paradise was just up the escarpment, 15 or 20 miles from our ICP. And I got to do branch planning on a FEMA mission assignment to help. And boy, this was around Christmas, and if there is ever a call to service, it was an event like this. These folks lost everything, and they so appreciated and needed this help. And I thought, I took this picture on going up to help supply one of the feed stations that we established for local people to come and get, hay for their horses, or, feed or dog food or cat food or cages or whatever. And it says, I don't know if you can read this: looters beware. We have guns and a backhoe, so keep out. And, that it was probably the result of folks further victimizing this impacted community. Okay. Here is just something I slipped in real quick so that you could see that we did implement ICS. We used the 215 to help visualize our response needs and our
medicate. We do not give any IV medication in our.
Somebody needs to mute their phone.
I was just going to say, if you guys check and make sure that you're muted, I can't find out who it is.
And then if they did not receive any opiates on their initial assessment, then
somebody who's giving opiates needs to mute their phone.
Them there. Once they arrive, they will be checked in. They will initially be seen by an HCA or CNA. And
sorry, I can't find out who it is.
Can you mute everybody?
Yeah, but it'll mute you too.
Oh, can I unmute? I'll unmute.
Yeah, okay.
A brief introduction to their support role. And
okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep. We're good.
Great. Okay, thank you, Barb. Thank you. Anyway, this is just to show you that we do implement the tools in ICS to help. And again, this was very helpful to the folks on the ground there. They were managing the local countywide or area fire-wide response, and this really helped them again visualize their assets, their needs, and the critical tasks. So very useful tool. The 215 is a great tool. Okay, hang on. All right, and this was Operation Hello Kitty, and we had 3 and sometimes 4 companion animal and multiple species animal shelters: Silver Dollar, Riverdale, and the Chico Airport. So keeping them supplied, keeping them staffed, providing all the information they needed about search and rescue activities, and like that was a big part of our activities. This is my bed in the warehouse, and this is my shower that we stayed in. And here's my ops chief, Gustavo, working on a 215, and just more pictures of the incredible devastation that happened in that area. It burned, the fire kind of vented through the galvanized culverts under the roads, and it melted the galvanized tin off of them, and they kind of collapsed. So it even affected the roads. So I was very amazed about that. And also we did, other people that stayed in the warehouse were California animal control officers, and they did search and rescue on a grid pattern every day for weeks, recovering pets that had somehow escaped and hid out from the flames, and brought them to the shelters for reunification and care. And a lot of burns, a lot of them were transported to the University of California Davis's Veterinary Medical School campus, and they did grafts of tilapia skin on the burn pads. They'd find cats and dogs and coyotes and bears, and all kinds of things, and they'd graft this fish skin on their feet, and it would allow them to regrow an epithelium on their feet so that they could survive. It was very interesting. Okay. We're kind of wrapping down, as Barb said. 2021 COVID, you know, in the big push by the federal government, many USDA veterinarians served around the country as human vaccinators and as IMT organizational groups. And I was on a FEMA mission assignment again, and helped manage the deployment of veterinary services assets, personnel into Texas and Oklahoma for the big vaccination efforts in both states. And I also served as a vaccinator. So another thing we did. And like I said, it was an ESF 11 activation for support. And we deployed more than 700 personnel, and USDA Veterinary Medical Officers and Animal Health Technicians administered over 400,000 vaccinations and supported the efforts at some of the mega sites, particularly down in Texas at the Dallas Motor Speedway, and at the fairgrounds. So a lot of work was done. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about quickly is the current African swine fever outbreak that's started in probably April or May on the island of Hispaniola, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. And we care about this because African swine fever as a disease has not been in the Western Hemisphere in over 40 years. And so this is a big disease incursion into our hemisphere from the rest of the world. And it is a devastating foreign animal disease that would rock and probably, without Herculean efforts, really damage commercial swine production and transitional swine production in the United States. This is a big, and this is another global pandemic that's going on. Here is just the last 2 or 3 years of how this pandemic has spread around the world. It comes from Africa. That's where it lives normally, in the wild warthogs and then their ticks. And somehow it got out into Turkey, probably through food waste, because it survives very well in pork products. And then it got into Eastern Europe, and then it spread across Russia, and then it spread into China. And it has gotten into the islands of the Pacific, not into Australia yet, but you can see in these years, it has pretty much become a global pandemic. And now it has reached the Western Hemisphere in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Haiti has no real functional government, so we don't know when it started there, but the Dominican Republic noticed increased deaths in April, and it was finally diagnosed in July at one of the main labs at Plum Island here in the United States. Okay, again, this is the first time African swine fever has been found in the Western Hemisphere in 40 years. July 28th, again, the USDA Foreign Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab at Plum Island confirmed the diagnosis in the Dominican Republic. And then they diagnosed it in Haiti. And there's about 700 miles separating Dominican Republic from Florida. There's 80 miles separating Cuba from Florida, and then about 230 or so miles separating Puerto Rico from the Dominican Republic. And there's a lot of unofficial boat traffic in between, so that's very concerning. And it's about the same distance from the Dominican Republic to Cuba, and we do not know what's going on in Cuba as far as animal disease outbreaks. It's a black hole. We get no intelligence on animal disease, and it's also that way in a lot of the smaller countries in the Caribbean coast of Central America. So big unknowns in disease spread down in that part of the world. And then in September, we confirmed it in Haiti. And The island of Hispaniola is now completely involved. And here's some history of how this disease has spread from the Eastern Hemisphere, from Europe into Cuba and the Dominican Republic previously, and into Brazil. But then these outbreaks have been mitigated, and we're wrapping this up, but it's a highly contagious and deadly viral disease of domestic and feral pigs. The pigs shed virus, it kills them, and the virus can remain infectious in pork products like ham or sausage for months. It is not a human disease, and it's not a food safety issue. Here's the big deal. The virus can survive 100 days to 300 days in hams or sausage in cured months, and even longer in other products. Okay, this is a big concern. Okay, this is a quick image of a backyard farm in the Dominican Republic, and it killed everything, killed all their pigs, and it's 100% mortality. It's a very bad strain. And it's about 3 weeks ago. And these are Haitian immigrants crossing the Rio Grande River into Texas last week. And nobody is looking at all the things they bring with them. Okay. Many of these people have been in South America for a while, but not all of them. So this is a concern to me. Okay. That's all I'll say about that. Okay. And USDA has been asked to assist the Dominican Republic in the response. We're supporting them virtually and with a few folks on site, and we're supporting them in their ability to do laboratory diagnostics. Okay, so we really don't have boots on the ground down there, but we are providing technical and virtual support to their response efforts and goods, supplies, PPE, chemicals to help them, and subject matter expertise. Okay. We've talked about this, these are complex incidents. Any way you want to measure them, the incident command system works. Communication with your teams, with other agencies up and down the stream of command is always complicated. And there's a lot of groups that work together in these responses. And, things like this, working together, knowing each other before an incident is very important. Okay. And so I am done, and we are in the question and answer period. I've gone a couple of minutes into that, so I apologize, but let her rip if you have any questions or anything that you think I could help you with or want my contact information.
Anyone have any questions? If you do, you're welcome to unmute and ask it directly.
There's some things in the chat. Barb, you want to?
Yeah, I don't see any questions.
Okay.
It was just communiques.
Okay.
But you are welcome to put it in the chat if you have questions. I have a question while you're thinking. Oh, right, looks like we got one here. Oh, can we get your contact info? And I can send that out when I send their follow-up if you want.
Please.
Okay, I will do that. And then just a couple of questions. My face was like this a lot of times that you were talking. Ugh, gross.
I know, I took the bad ones out.
Oh, when you talk about those screw worms, oh, it just grosses me out.
It's horrible, horrendous. As an animal welfare issue, they get on people too. It's very awful.
So my question to that is, that dog that had the infestation on its neck, is there treatment for that? Or
yeah, there are, chemicals, kind of insecticides that you can pour on that wound to make them jump out of there. And then you treat a nasty toxic wound.
Oh, God.
A lot of you guys are medical, I think. So just think about how nasty that wound would be. And they can feed through essential structures and, nerves or vessels or even organs, so it's a devastating infection. My dad was a cattleman in Texas, and he never did anything that caused any wound on any of his cattle from the last hard frost in the spring until after the first hard frost in the winter, because those frosts killed the screwworms, you know. So that man, you know, think about it, determined when he calved, determined when he vaccinated, it determined when he castrated. Think about that impact on animal husbandry today.
Wow.
If you
Really?
couldn't do any of that in the whole summertime or the warm time period of the year.
Wow. That's quite impactful.
Mm-hmm.
I had another question. The cows that were fleeing the wildfire. So I've never seen cows at a wildfire. I've seen horses and they'll run. Will cows run, or do they
Yes.
stand there transfixed? You know?
No, they flee, they run, but you think about, you know, there's fences everywhere. They
Right.
can jam up in the corner or in a canyon, you know. So, oh, that fire, this is a slide I messed up. That fire, it was the Starbuck fire that had the cattle pictures.
Mhm.
That fire went 64 miles in 10 hours.
Wow.
It had an average rate of spread at 6.4 miles an hour. And by satellite data, there was a period of time where there was an over 12 mile an hour rate of spread on that fire.
All
So
that dry
think about
grass.
that.
Wow.
You can see how things got burned over.
Yeah.
It was unprecedented rate of spread, according to my forestry friends, my wildland fire friends.
No way to get animals out of that.
64 miles an hour in 64 miles in 10 hours.
That's crazy. That's an amazing spread. So there is a comment. This was fascinating. Thank you so much. I learned several things I will use here in Wyoming. So we love hearing that. And another comment, there's so many things that can impact our daily life and the health of our animals, as well as us. So this was a great presentation, and hopefully it brought to light some things that people just never thought of before, you know, and how impactful that can be. So
it was a pleasure for me to get to talk to you guys today, and thank you for your attention, and don't hesitate to get my contact information if you think I can help, because I can maybe turn you on to resources that are like me, closer to where you are.
oh, that'd be great. Well,
Yep.
thank you so much. And if there are no other questions, I just want to remind everybody to please go to the SurveyMonkey evaluation link that I sent. Complete the evaluation so we can help build a better program, or, you know, just get some other information. There is a question here. Is there a site that we can get updates of known epidemics?
You can Google USDA and then like African swine fever, and that'll take you to USDA information on that, or highly pathogenic avian influenza or avian influenza. Just Google it. It'll go there.
Also, the WHO, the World Health Organization, also keeps a running tally of everything that's going on in the world.
There is another organization called the OIE. It is a French-based organization for animal health. It's like the WHO, World Health Organization for Animals, and it's OIE. And if you'll just Google OIE, because it's a French acronym, and I am not going to embarrass myself by trying to say the name, but Google OIE, and it gives you a global perspective on these animal disease outbreaks as well.
Great, thank you. All right, well, everybody, thank you so much for participating in this presentation today. Don't forget to do your SurveyMonkey, and if you need or want a certificate of participation, please make sure you email me. I did put my email in the chat, but it's just barb.clark@imail.org. So, and you've all gotten so many emails from me. I'm sure you've got all my contact info there too. So make sure you let me know. All right. Well, Leslie, thank you again so much. This was great. I'm assuming that's your pup. Very cute.
Yes.
Very
Very cute.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will let you go and thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
everybody, we'll see you all next week, hopefully. All right. Take care, Leslie.